Hi everyone, welcome to Productivity at Your Fingertips, Modelstream 2.0 preview. I just wanted to introduce Microdesk to you all before we jump into the webinar. So Microdesk was founded in 1994 as an Autodesk reseller with a simple mission to assist architecture, engineering, construction owners, and GIS firms with improving workflows and integrating project delivery technologies. 25 years later, that mission still holds true. Microdesk is a well-established AECO consulting firm with 13 offices in the US and UK, and we have over 250 AECO consultants, solution specialists, and software developers. One of the hottest topics in the AECO world is urbanization. Studies suggest that the US will build 114 cities the size of Boston in the next 30 years. Here at Microdesk, we can help make sure that you're prepared to meet these demands. We use software from industry leaders such as Autodesk, IBM, and Esri, and combine it with our vision and passion for sustainability to meet the demands of urbanization. Our team of industry expert consultants are redefining project delivery and asset management. And to help support the industry with these demands of urbanization, Microdesk provides full asset management services. This includes digital twin delivery services, data management and analytics, asset management strategic planning, Maximo design and implementation, and application development. Now I'll let George Broadbent jump on to take you through today's webinar. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I think you're going to enjoy this presentation quite a bit. Some upcoming and new features that we have for our Modelstream product. Myself, George Broadbent, I head up the asset management group here. Spent a lot of my time in information architecture, enterprise systems, and just really trying to understand how information flows between content creation and content consumption, which really fits well with the Modelstream product, which allows us to move data between Revit and Maximo and then back into Revit. One note for this presentation here is that we'll be addressing questions at the end. So if you see on your panel there is a questions tab. You can enter a question in there, and then we'll compile the questions at the end and try to address as many as possible. So the Modelstream product here, we're going to break it into three components here. Kind of a little bit of a background and introduction into Modelstream, digital twins, why do we want to connect BIM to CMMS, some cost savings numbers, because cost is always important. Then we're going to dive into the new features, some data filters, improved function and performance, architectural improvements to the platform, and a behind the firewall viewer. Last, we're going to dive into what I think is the most fun part of the product, is the Ask Alex component, which is an AI-driven facility assistant, and how we can use it to interrogate the 2D and 3D models that we use as our data source. So as we go forward, I mean, just a definition here is, digital twins. What are they? There's a lot of buzz in the industry about digital twins. Effectively, it's an as-built model. It's an as-built model of the facility that incorporates operational data. So it includes the data, the geometry from the time of construction or renovation, and the current equipment condition, as well as sensor data from building automation systems or monitoring systems. So it's this combination of information, it's this sort of confluence of information that makes up the digital twin. And so as we say, Microdesk here, digital twins, these represent the future. These are what facilities and operations are going to be using in the future, where you have asset records linked to external systems, you have warranties and manuals, you have data, you have 2D floor plans, all being derived from a 3D digital twin of your facility. So this is the future. As we say, this is not the future. These are photos of actual facilities, and the right side there is what was an attempt at creating a digital twin in a 2D environment, all of which were very, obviously paper still exists, but it's usually siloed information. Now we're talking about being able to spread information out across an entire organization. So what's the overall problem that Modelstream itself is trying to solve? In order to look at the problem, we have to go back and see how does data flow from conception all the way through operations. So right now, in this data transition timeline here, we're just going to focus on the end of construction. So at the end of construction, we have the beginning of operations, end of major construction, that is. So what happens is the operations and maintenance manuals are collected, the manufacturer cut sheet information is collected. We have all this data, paper, PDFs, that's collected at the end of the major construction period. But then as construction winds down, the deliverables are prepared, the final closeout packages are done, and then somewhere along this timeline, there's a construction closeout package that's completed. But in the meantime, the deliverable has not made its way over into operations. So operations has to go through and survey the facility. They have to obtain the O&M manuals on their own, develop their preventive maintenance routine, and in some cases replace equipment that has failed. And then lo and behold, the operations data delivery occurs after the construction closeout, and it looks something like this, where you have boxes and reams of paper, and if you're lucky, maybe you get DVDs of PDFs. Again, operations has to sort through this information, organize it, relate it back to what they've surveyed, and figure out what they have in terms of information. And so this is sort of the norm that's been going on for quite some time now. But what happens during this 18-month period when the facility is being operated? So what this chart here shows you is it's one of three typical failure curves that we see for equipment. And this one here shows a front-loaded failure curve where you have a high potential for a piece of equipment to fail right after it's been installed. And on the timeline there, you'll see it's the data delivery timeline, which stretches out to about 18 months. So we have a period in the very beginning where we are faced with equipment that has a high potential for failure. So we call this the operational blind spot. They don't have the information, they don't have the operational data delivery. So the trick is really to figure out how do we get the information to operations faster and more effectively and more accurately. Now, from a cost perspective, though, if we take a quick look at what that means, the number that we typically use for our calculations is 23 cents a square foot is what the cost is for what they call inadequate interoperability for owners and operators. This comes out of a NIST study, and this 23 cents a square foot is broken down into a number of different components. The most important one is the first number here, which represents 57% of the total cost, which is 12 cents a square foot. And this is O&M information verification cost. This is fundamentally the time that it takes to find information. If you are looking for a warranty date or a warranty document on a piece of equipment, if you are looking for work orders that have been opened, these are all things that take time, they take money, they take you away from doing the job at hand. And NIST has estimated this at about 12 cents a square foot. So really we need to look at, we've got a delay in getting information to the owners and the operators. We've got a cost associated with looking for information. We need to find a way to streamline this entire process. And that's where really the BIM process comes into play. So BIM at the center of the entire process, they put that at the center of your design and construction process. You can now start to streamline the operational data delivery and handover. So what that looks like is, as data is created from conceptualization, design, management, and construction, it's the same core set of data that you're dealing with in the BIM models. We have an asset commissioning process there, but now we have a new process in there, which is called the data transition. The data transition is the handover from construction to operations and maintenance. And again, you'll see that the BIM process is at the center of it all. And so in order to do that, what we promote and advocate for is using Modelstream as the data delivery process and the IBM Maximo system for the maintenance management solution. The two of them work extremely well together. They're very efficient and effective. And so Modelstream allows us to create assets, update asset attributes. All this information comes from the Revit model itself. So if you have a Revit as-built, you have existing conditions, take that information, bring it over into Maximo in an all electronic format. There's nobody having to export information to spreadsheets or retype information. Another very important thing that we do is we create the asset location hierarchy. Asset attachments also come through if they're referenced in the BIM model. And then this has been the key point to Modelstream all along, which is the bidirectional synchronization capability of the product. Being able to use a mapping file to push data over into Maximo from Revit, and then take the information back from Maximo into the Revit file itself. This allows us to keep the Revit model in a updated state. It keeps it current. It keeps it allows us to create this digital twin out of the Revit model itself. And as a side note, we have lots of videos online that show the detailed capabilities and features of Modelstream. I encourage you to go and look at those. It shows you how the mapping files are created, how the data is pushed and pulled back and forth. So this is really a preview of the 2.0 release of Modelstream itself. And so Modelstream 2.0 now starts to build upon the success of the previous releases. Again, we use Revit as our foundational data source for the information coming over into the IBM Maximo system. But now we've made it smarter. Now we've made Modelstream smarter in the sense that we've integrated the IBM Watson platform into the Modelstream product so that it can learn from the data that you're pushing over into Maximo, and you can start to interact with the data in ways that have not been possible before. So Modelstream 2.0 on the Revit side of things, which is an add-in that we've created for the Revit platform. And in terms of versions, it's fully compatible with the latest versions of Revit. But we've improved the performance of the system overall. We've added into it an asset and component data filter, which is, as I'll show you in a couple of these slides here, is really important because not everything that you're pushing from Revit is an asset. So for example, a piece of pipe, a piece of ductwork is not an asset and doesn't normally get moved over into your Maximo environment. And so when we're doing the mappings, you don't necessarily need to see all of that information. And so this asset and component data filter allows us to streamline the mapping process. And then, parameters to classifications allows us to understand when you have two families that have different types associated with them, that you can map those different types, the parameters for those types, to the classifications within Maximo itself. Again, something that has come up with a few of our customers, so we've added in that feature and made sure that's a nice streamlined process. So one of the things that we talked about here with the asset and component data filter is, okay, so we've got to now identify what an asset is. So we use this fundamental set of definitions here for an asset. It can be refurbished or rebuilt, taken offline and repaired. If you go through this checklist here and you look at each piece of equipment in the Revit model and you compare it to this, you can determine whether it's an asset or whether it's just a component within the Maximo system. So long as it meets any one of these criteria, it qualifies as an asset and should be flagged as such. So the data filter allows us to single out or identify assets within the Revit model so that you can easily view them, so that you can color code them, as you see here in this screenshot. You can make the model conform to your coloring standards. So, for example, many customers have fire protection lines in the buildings painted red. So now you can paint the fire protection assets as red inside the Revit model itself using this technique. So we use this, we assign a tag to the assets, and then that asset tag is used in the Modelstream filter to filter out the information. And so the tagging within the model is done through a simple schedule where you'll see the family, there's an asset tag and a component tag associated with it. You can pretty easily go through the entire model in short order and update the information. So like you'll see like dampeners, air handling units, air separators. I mean, these all get tagged as assets. And then what happens is on the mapping side, we have just a simple checkbox on there that says I want to filter out all my assets or my components. So when you look at the mapping component for Modelstream, the normal state would be to show you everything. So you'll see like on the screen there, airbox left and airbox right, which weren't flagged as assets. So they show up on this list because they're unchecked. But then when you check them off, the list gets reduced, and now I'm only looking at assets. So then everything that's listed as an asset would then get mapped to your classification system. And we have a few enhancements in terms of like being able to do multiple families to classifications and some streamlined workflow processes in there. But effectively now, you understand now what it is that has to get a mapping to your Maximo system. Again, these are subtle but important features to the Modelstream system, because it just streamlines the overall workflow that you are using for each one of your models. Then, on the Maximo side of things, we have quite a few enhancements that we've made. There is now a new model administration module. And that module allows us to, it's referenced off of the system configuration menu. In that module, you now have multiple options for how do you want to view the models themselves? Where do you want to store them? So you have the option of online, which is sort of the default out-of-the-box configuration where you're using the Autodesk Forge environment for storing the geometry and the data from the Revit model. But now we have, behind the firewall capabilities. So there's an extraction program that gets run on the Revit model. It runs through the Forge system, but then it creates a set of files that can be stored on your Maximo server. And you have the option to mix and match this information. So if, let's say, you have a facility, a building that is sensitive, then you can store that information behind your firewall. And then other facilities or other buildings can be stored in the Forge platform. So you can mix and match that information as you like. We will be introducing new capabilities in terms of referencing BIM 360 as well in future releases. And the architecture is improved overall in the system here. So for example, we've eliminated the need for the Microsoft web browser, web server in here, the IIS browser server. And this is critical because as we go forward, we can now start to make incremental changes or incremental updates and improvements to the system. And we're just dealing with one central Maximo module for those updates. So as we start to introduce things like BIM 360 integration, those will get updated. Those updates will come into the admin module itself. There are data export tools available as well, which I was referencing before, which allows us to extract the geometry from the Revit model, and also to extract the data that's within those Revit models as well. And then, the newest feature is Ask Alex, which is our AI-driven component. So, one of the things here is, there's not a whole lot of detail you can see in these screenshots here, but the idea is that the new model administration tool is a Maximo module. So it has all of the look and feels of the latest versions of Maximo. It's integrated right within in the system there. So the Forge system uses a combination of buckets and files, and so now you can manage those buckets right from the interface here. If you need to delete a bucket on all the associated models, you can do that, again, as long as you have permissions. And then you can also create those buckets. No need to deal with the Forge interface. It all gets handled natively within the Maximo environment itself. And I mentioned before, the online and behind the firewall options available for the model viewing. So again, it's a pretty straightforward process that we go through. There's an export module that we have to extract the data and the geometry. That information is either stored on the local file server or in the cloud file storage. And then the viewer that we have is built on the Forge platform. I think this is really important, especially if you have a large institution and you have facilities that you don't necessarily, you consider to be sensitive, and you don't want to risk any kind of exposure. Although the Forge platform is highly secure, which we can cover it as a separate topic, but we've done some analyses with Autodesk on their cloud security, and shown how they're compliant with the latest NIST standards for information security. So Forge is an extremely reliable and secure platform, and but if you just want that sort of extra level of security, where you want the files to be stored on your local Maximo server, you have that option now as well. Ask Alex. So Ask Alex was built with the IBM Watson platform. So it's an integration that allows us. It's an integration and custom development piece there that allows us to use what we call a conversational tone. So you can start to ask questions in a natural query language, I think as some people reference it. So you don't necessarily have to understand database language, Maximo speak. If you understand your facility, if you understand the equipment that's there, you can start to ask it questions about those and see where that equipment is. The incredible thing is that it allows us now to understand and ask questions about not only the Maximo data, but the 3D model data. And everywhere I say 3D and models, I mean, if you have 2D plans, we can make that work with this environment as well. So the 2D floor plans we can bring into the system as well. There just might be a few extra steps that we have to go through. But why did we choose the IBM Watson platform? That's really what we're talking about here. And I think this, the Forrester Wave here really highlights some of the drivers for doing this. Clearly, it's the native integration with the Maximo environment that's a huge driver. But as you can see, IBM is really on the forefront of this conversational computing platform. They really have an advantage over everybody. Yes, I mean Google is sort of at their heels, but I always liken it to if you do a Google search and you actually look at the number of results, typically it's in the hundreds of thousands or millions. And what you really want, you don't want that when you're talking to a system about your facility. You don't want to see, every little ancillary detail. You want what they call targeted search results. And so the IBM Watson platform really gives us that ability to understand what you're talking about and give you the exact information that you need. Not just here's 100,000 results for you to try and filter through. So we really see that's the advantage that IBM has over the other platforms, and it's why we chose to integrate with create the Ask Alex system on top of our Modelstream product. So it's all built on the IBM cloud in terms of the Watson environment. We're waiting for the certification of the with Watson piece that we would get with that. And the key thing here to note is that we don't store your data in a public cloud in any way. It's abstracted data, key value pairs, and things like that we're using. Kind of the secret sauce is the way that we've built the system to understand understand what it is you're talking about and how does that translate back into your data. So your data remains on your servers, and then we're interacting with these key value pairs and these instructions that Watson has as to how to match that information up with your data. So as I was saying, Ask Alex understands the Maximo data, assets, routes, locations, specifications, which are all very, Maximo specific pieces, and then 2D and 3D model data itself. And really, this is this is an industry first. So we have talked. I know personally that I have talked with individuals, for a number of years now, from when Watson was first coming out, or first, really heavily being launched a few years ago, and saying, well, wouldn't it be great if Watson could understand a 3D model and all the data and geometry that's in that 3D model? And we've done it. That's the simplest way to put it. The Ask Alex system understands systems within the 3D model. It understands materials. It understands all of that and can relate that information back to the 3D view that you see here in these screenshots. So with that, I'm going to actually switch over to Ask Alex and do a quick demo for you.
Okay, so what we have here is the Maximo system, hasn't been customized. And when we go to the menu, we see under Assets, we now have a Modelstream model section. When we open up the models, we go to our first default model and go over to the model viewer. And there you'll see the three typical elements, the two of the typical elements we have, which are the assets, the elements, and now we have a new one, which is called Ask. Ask allows us to ask any questions about the model, which will be coming up on the screen in a second here. When we go to the Ask, it's going to allow us to do what we call natural language queries, meaning we can just ask it in our own friendly voice. We don't need to understand Maximo language. We don't need to understand Watson language. So nothing special we really need to know. We just need to know the facility that we're working in and how to, and be able to ask it about the different types of equipment, routes, and systems that are in the place in the facility there. So when I flip over here to Ask, as this finishes to load, you can now start to type in our question for the Ask Alex system, and let's just say, show me route 1. And what it's going to do is it's going to now look for all of the pieces of equipment that are on Route 1. And as you'll see here, there's 45 pieces of equipment from the results, and now they're all highlighted in the model. And then we can start to look at these pieces of equipment, look at their the asset information, the element information, and so we can continue this process of asking questions and say, okay, so now show me system supply air. And this is where now we're actually asking a question about something that doesn't exist within Maximo, but does exist within the Revit model, originally in the Revit model. And now you'll see the view switches, and we see where all the supply air components are. And as in typical Modelstream fashion, the model will zoom in and focus on that equipment that you're seeing. And then we can also start to ask it, some more questions about things like preventive maintenance. So show me work yet not completed. So now you can start to see where work is occurring throughout the facility, where work is open. As you can see, it's thinking about that, and then you can do so. Maybe maybe it wasn't work yet not completed, but maybe I want to look at actual active work orders and where the active work orders are in the system. Now you see we found one active work order, 4. They're highlighted in the model, and now it's zoomed in and showing you where those pieces of equipment are. So these are just some of the features that you can do and start to interact with the model and start to interact with your data, start to interact with the data that came from the Revit model, and really start to expand out how you look at your facility. No longer tables and charts, but now interactive 3D models that you can just use natural query language to interact with the information.
So these are all the questions that I was going to be asking in the system there. So the so warranty expiration information, assets with a high criticality, show me system supply air, show me where there are open work orders, show me assets from Maker GE. These are all questions that you can start to ask the system and start to interact with the model and have it display the location of where everything is within the system. Within the model itself. The fact that it understands the natural language, and B, understands what the different systems are that you have and what the different rooms are and the manufacturers is incredibly powerful. And so, as we said, this is the 2.0 release, and so we're going to now start to use this as our new foundation for building out this architecture. So the first thing is that we'll have the ability to interact with the model and understand, like, show me where there are open work orders, show me where work is being done today, those kind of interactions, those questions. And then from there, we're going to start to build out additional functionality. As we get, feedback from our clients, we'll get, sort of a wish list of use cases. And so we'll be able to quickly add these features in. And so you'll start to see, incremental releases coming out much faster from us. How is this licensed? It's a very simple license structure. It's a subscription pricing on a monthly or an annual basis. We bundle into all this any of the costs associated with Forge and Watson, so it all appears transparent to you. Next steps in this process here is the beta program, which starts in October, which is open to our existing customers. We have some that are looking at using this right away on their servers. And then, select industries, by invite only, which you can apply if you go to microdesk.com/contact to request an invite to the beta program. Then we're targeting a production release of this system in November for the official, Modelstream 2.0 launch. And then, upcoming features that'll be in a 2.1, 2.2 type of release there is to start to use the results to create work orders, be able to download the results if you want to, either a CSV or a spreadsheet. AI responses. So the AI systems are interesting in the sense that they are constantly learning about how to interact. They're constantly learning by what it is that you mean. They're constantly learning how to improve their responses. And so we'll be working alongside of our existing customers to continue to train Watson. And then, at some point it will be able to start to learn more on its own and make associations on its own. And then on the Revit plugin side, we're looking at the BIM 360 integration and being able to pull data in from BIM 360 and having more interactive experience with that platform as well. So that's it for the preview of Modelstream 2.0. Again, if you have questions you'd like to address, you can ask them in the questions box. So I'm not quite sure the question here. Specific O&M property sets for different types of assets. So yes, I mean we do work, you know, during the Revit model development. I'm hoping this answers your question. But during the Revit model development, we do work with the customer to identify which attributes need to be associated with each one of the assets, each type of equipment. Generally speaking, there's a core set of required attributes, and then we work on expanding that list out. We have another application that actually is a data management application that specifically addresses that question and allows us to enumerate the various assets and the types of assets, and then associate the attributes associated with them, and then that can be brought back into the Maximo environment. So is there a change register? Yes, so everything we do with the Modelstream environment is logged. So every interaction that occurs every time we're pushing data over into the Maximo environment, there's a separate log file that's created, which has a time date stamp and the changes that were made to the assets themselves. So does Alex work across multiple models or only one model at a time? So yes, it'll work across multiple models. The example that I was showing there was a single model, but the intent is that if I'm looking at assets in one facility, and then I ask questions about assets that are in another facility, then the model itself would change. And then that holds true. So one of the future release pieces that I didn't list in the presentation was actually a GIS integration as well. So then if I'm asking questions about spatial assets, underground utilities, for example, then the view would switch over to that, and that'll probably be on like a 2.5 release that we have for that. So the IFC question comes up quite a bit in terms of how do we interact with that. The simplest way that we have to interact with IFC today is for the IFC file to be brought into the Revit environment, and then we connect the Revit to the Maximo system itself. So we are looking, we are planning out the 3.0 release for Modelstream, and that I can tell you that is one of those items that's on the roadmap for that. It's a much more complex solution, doing a direct IFC import. So we've had to push that out to a little bit later in the timeline. Any other questions? Those are good questions. I appreciate it. Okay. Yes. Sorry. So I tried to touch upon that. So we are compatible with the Revit 2018 and above, and with the Maximo 7.6X environments as well.
All right, well, if there's no more questions, we'll wrap up. We do have an upcoming webinar in November. It's What's New in Bluebeam Review. That's going to be on November 19th, and we will have another webinar in October, but that will be posted on our website soon. And if you have any questions, comments, or you'd like to learn more about some of our training, consulting, or software solutions, be sure to check out our website, give us a call, or email us at webinars@microdesk.com. You can also connect with us on our various social media platforms. And if there's no other questions, we're going to log off for today. Thank you, folks, for joining us. Have a great one.